At the height of its power, Sparta was more than a city-state. It was a living embodiment of military perfection. By the late 5th century BCE, Sparta had emerged from the Peloponnesian War not just victorious, but seemingly invincible, a society sculpted by centuries of discipline, duty, and an unyielding warrior ethos. Its citizens were trained from childhood in the agoge, a grueling education system that forged boys into soldiers and men into instruments of the state. Every facet of Spartan life, politics, family, religion, and daily routine, revolved around the art of war. In the streets of Sparta, the echoes of marching boots and the rhythm of drills were more common than laughter or song. Central to Sparta's dominance were its kings and the powerful council of ephors, a political body that balanced authority and enforced the rigid laws that kept the city-state stable. King Agesilaus II, a towering figure both in stature and ambition, personified the martial pride of Sparta. Under his leadership, Sparta projected power across the Greek world, its hoplites feared from the Peloponnesus to Ionia. Yet, Sparta's Golden Age was not built on military prowess alone. It was underpinned by a social structure that maintained cohesion, loyalty, and a strict hierarchy. Citizens, or Spartiates, were warriors first, with personal desires subordinated to the survival and honor of the state. Helots, the subjugated population, toiled endlessly to provide the Spartans the freedom to train, fight, and govern without distraction. But even in this age of apparent perfection, cracks were forming. Sparta's success relied on more than swords and shields. It demanded constant vigilance, loyalty from allies, and unshakable confidence in its institutions. Pride, as history would soon reveal, can be as dangerous as any enemy army. The city-state's rigid social and political structures, designed to create unity, also fostered envy, ambition, and resentment. Among the kings, ephors, and influential families, political rivalries simmered, hidden beneath a veneer of public harmony. And beyond Sparta's borders, neighboring states watched, learned, and, in some cases, plotted. Despite these growing undercurrents, the aura of Spartan invincibility remained potent. Tales of Spartan discipline and battlefield heroism spread far and wide. They were a culture that revered courage above comfort and loyalty above life itself. Parents would proudly send their sons into the agoge at age 7, knowing they were being molded into warriors capable of standing shoulder to shoulder in the phalanx, a formation that was both shield and weapon, embodying unity and absolute trust. A single Spartan soldier's failure could mean the collapse of the line. A single act of bravery could turn the tide of a battle. This delicate balance between individual valor and collective strength defined Spartan society at its peak. Yet, even as the citizens of Sparta trained relentlessly and the city-state's armies patrolled the Peloponnesian Peninsula, an invisible tension lingered. Alliances were fragile, rivalries intense, and the very system that had elevated Sparta to greatness carried the seeds of its vulnerability. The Helots, the oppressed class whose labor fed the warrior elite, lived under constant fear of reprisal. Neighboring city-states, though outwardly respectful, quietly questioned Sparta's motives and resented its dominance. Even within the Spartan leadership, ambition occasionally eclipsed duty, creating a volatile mix of pride, fear, and potential betrayal. This was the Sparta of legend, disciplined, unyielding, and unmatched in warfare, but also a society perched precariously on the edge of hubris. Its Golden Age, a time of unparalleled military supremacy and cultural pride, set the stage for a dramatic story of ambition, betrayal, and the fragility of even the mightiest powers. As the camera pans over the stark, austere landscapes of Laconia, the audience is drawn into a world where honor is life, and life is war, a world poised on the precipice of a catastrophic fall. Here, at the peak of Spartan glory, we begin our story, a tale not just of armies and battles, but of human ambition, loyalty, and the fateful choices that would ultimately end the Spartan Golden Age. Beneath the disciplined veneer of Sparta's Golden Age, tensions were quietly escalating. The city-state's dominance, once unchallenged, was beginning to strain under the weight of political rivalries, internal discontent, and the restless ambitions of its neighbors. Sparta's kings, bound by law but fueled by personal ambition, frequently clashed with the ephors, the powerful council that kept even royalty in check. These rivalries were not mere political games. They were struggles that could, and would, determine the fate of an entire civilization. Every decision carried consequences, and every personal slight risked igniting a fire that could engulf the state. Sparta's allies, too, began to chafe under its supremacy. Many city-states of the Peloponnesian League had long relied on Sparta's protection, but dependence often bred resentment. These allies provided soldiers, resources, and loyalty, but loyalty is fragile when ambition meets pride. As Sparta expanded its influence into central Greece, imposing its authority over traditionally independent regions, whispers of dissent grew louder. The once feared Spartan military, for all its discipline, could not fight politics and diplomacy simultaneously. Meanwhile, within Sparta, cracks were widening in the social fabric. The helots, the subjugated class whose labor sustained the warrior elite, remained a constant source of tension. Though heavily oppressed, they outnumbered their Spartan masters, and their potential for revolt was a shadow that haunted every Spartan council and training ground. The fear of rebellion weighed on Spartan leaders, forcing them to maintain vigilance on two fronts: outward, against rival states, and inward, against the very people who enabled their society to function. The personal ambitions of Spartan leaders further complicated matters. King Agesilaus II, though a brilliant strategist, was not immune to pride. His military campaigns, while largely successful, sometimes drew criticism for overreach. Other influential families and ephors saw opportunity in his successes and failures alike, quietly plotting to enhance their own power at the expense of unity. Alliances within the city-state were fragile, marriages of convenience masking deeper resentments, and promises of loyalty often carried the weight of expediency rather than principle. Externally, the political landscape of Greece was shifting rapidly. Thebes, once a peripheral power, began to assert itself with ambition and cunning. Corinth, Argos, and even some former allies of Sparta eyed opportunities to weaken the hegemon. Diplomats worked tirelessly, treaties were signed and broken, and the subtle art of betrayal was already in motion. Each negotiation, each seemingly innocuous meeting, carried the potential to tip the balance. Sparta's leaders, accustomed to unquestioned respect, were slowly learning that fear alone could no longer secure loyalty. This period of brewing discontent set the stage for one of the most dramatic reversals in Greek history. The audience begins to sense that the Golden Age of Sparta, for all its discipline and glory, is fragile. Pride, political rivalry, and the seeds of betrayal are converging, creating a tension that simmers beneath the surface. Viewers are drawn into a world of whispered plots, secret alliances, and mounting unease, a world where even the mightiest empire is vulnerable to the ambitions of a few. By the end of this section, the audience understands that Sparta's downfall will not come from a sudden invasion alone, but from the intricate web of human ambition, jealousy, and betrayal. The tension is palpable, the stakes immense, and the story hurtles toward the fateful moment when allies become adversaries, and the unshakable Spartan Golden Age begins to crumble from within. As Sparta's influence spread across Greece, the very alliances that had once guaranteed its supremacy began to falter. The Peloponnesian League, a network of city-states bound to Sparta through military treaties and mutual interest, was no longer a source of unquestioned strength. Ambition, resentment, and fear crept quietly into every council chamber and battlefield encampment. Allies who had once marched alongside Spartan soldiers in absolute loyalty now whispered in secret, questioning Sparta's authority and plotting to safeguard their own autonomy. Thebes, in particular, emerged as the most dangerous of these rivals. Once a peripheral city-state, it had grown in wealth, military innovation, and ambition. Its leaders observed Sparta's dominance with a mixture of awe and envy, calculating the precise moment to challenge the hegemon. Among them, Epaminondas would become a figure whose cunning and tactical brilliance would alter the course of Greek history. In private, the band generals discussed strategies that exploited Sparta's rigid military formations and predictable maneuvers. These quiet plans of defiance would soon erupt into open confrontation, demonstrating that loyalty in Greek politics was often as fleeting as the wind. Even Sparta's long-standing allies, Corinth, Argos, and other Peloponnesian states, began to distance themselves subtly. Financial burdens, demands for soldiers, and Spartan interference in local politics created resentment that simmered beneath polite diplomacy. Some states covertly supported Thebes, supplying intelligence or tacitly allowing rebellious factions to organize. The very people who had once celebrated Spartan victories now nursed grudges, waiting for the moment when they could reclaim autonomy and weaken the city-state that had long dictated terms across Greece. Within Sparta itself, these external betrayals amplified internal tensions. Leaders debated harsh measures to maintain loyalty, from punitive campaigns against rebellious allies to political purges at home. Each decision carried enormous risk. Overreach could provoke revolt, hesitation could embolden enemies, and a single misstep might unravel decades of Spartan dominance. The audience witnesses a society caught between rigid tradition and the necessity for flexibility, a tension that would have catastrophic consequences when Thebes struck. This section highlights the psychological and strategic dimensions of betrayal. The audience feels the rising stakes as former allies transition from supportive partners to cunning adversaries. Trust becomes a scarce commodity, and the once unified Spartan-led coalition fractures, leaving the city-state increasingly isolated. The tension is both political and emotional. Viewers see not only the erosion of Sparta's external alliances but also the mounting pressure on its leaders, whose pride and sense of invincibility blind them to the shifting balance of power. By the end of this section, it is clear that Sparta's fall will not be due solely to brute force but to a calculated unraveling of loyalty and alliances. The Golden Age that seemed eternal is now threatened from all sides, and the seeds of betrayal sown by allies turned adversaries are poised to bloom into full-scale disaster. The audience is left on edge, anticipating the clash that will decide the fate of Sparta and forever alter the landscape of ancient Greece. The moment of reckoning arrived at Leuctra in 371 BCE, where the full consequences of betrayal and fractured alliances would be laid bare. Sparta, long regarded as the unassailable military titan of Greece, faced a coalition led by Thebes under the brilliant general Epaminondas. The Spartans approached the battlefield with confidence born of centuries of triumph, their phalanxes disciplined and their commanders seasoned. Yet confidence alone could not protect them from a meticulously planned strategy that would exploit every rigidity in their formation. Epaminondas, understanding the strengths and predictable tendencies of the Spartan hoplites, orchestrated a revolutionary tactic, the oblique phalanx. Unlike the traditional evenly distributed lines of hoplites, he concentrated his elite forces on one flank, staggering the formation to punch decisively at Sparta's right wing. This innovation, almost unheard of in Greek warfare, aimed to shatter the Spartan elite first, creating chaos that would ripple across their entire line. The audience witnesses the intellectual brilliance behind battlefield strategy, where war is not merely a clash of swords but a chess game with lives and empires at stake. As the two armies collided, the initial charge was deafening. Spears clashed with shields, and the thunder of hooves and cries of men filled the air. The Spartans fought with characteristic discipline, their phalanx holding firm even under intense pressure. Yet the precision of the band maneuvers and the concentrated assault on the Spartan right began to take its toll. Panic flickered where confidence had once stood, and the psychological edge shifted. Viewers feel the tension in every moment, as seasoned warriors face the shock of innovation and betrayal not from strangers, but from the calculated strategies of a rising power. The human cost was immediate and staggering. Spartan soldiers, trained to hold the line no matter the circumstances, faced chaos as comrades fell and formations wavered. King Cleombrotus I, leading the Spartan forces, fought valiantly but could not counter the concentrated onslaught. The audience experiences the tragedy intimately, men bred for invincibility meeting their match not only in skill but in ingenuity. Epaminondas' tactical genius, combined with the internal vulnerabilities of Sparta exposed by fractured alliances, created a perfect storm. The aftermath of the battle was both dramatic and symbolic. For the first time in generations, Sparta suffered a humiliating defeat on its own terms. The golden phalanx, the symbol of Spartan invincibility, had been pierced. Fear and disbelief spread through the city-state, challenging the deeply ingrained belief in their martial supremacy. Across the Peloponnesus, allies and rivals alike took note. Sparta's aura of untouchable power was irrevocably tarnished. The audience is drawn into the emotional impact, the pride of centuries crushed in a single day, and the realization that even the mightiest can fall when ingenuity and betrayal converge. This battle did more than reshape the map of Greece, it reshaped the psyche of Sparta. Generals and soldiers who survived were left to reconcile their training, pride, and understanding of warfare with a new reality. Victory was no longer guaranteed by tradition alone. The narrative emphasizes both the strategic brilliance of Epaminondas and the human cost to Sparta, creating a gripping tension that blends intellectual fascination with emotional weight. Every fallen soldier, every fractured phalanx, underscores the high stakes and the irreversible shift in Greek power. By the end of Leuctra, the audience grasps the magnitude of the turning point. Sparta's golden age is shattered, its dominance challenged, and the carefully maintained aura of invincibility forever broken. The climactic confrontation delivers both spectacle and meaning, showing how betrayal, innovation, and political calculation can overturn centuries of assumed supremacy. The stage is now set for the fallout, the collapse of alliances, and the slow unraveling of one of history's most legendary military powers. The thunder of the Spartan defeat at Leuctra reverberated far beyond the battlefield, shaking the foundations of a city-state long thought unassailable. Sparta's authority, once absolute across the Peloponnesus, was suddenly questioned by allies and rivals alike. Fear and uncertainty spread quickly, as neighboring city-states realized that the seemingly invincible Spartan phalanx could be defeated. Corinth, Argos, and other former allies began to reconsider their loyalties, quietly testing the waters for autonomy or even rebellion. The carefully maintained coalition that had bolstered Sparta's supremacy now began to fracture, leaving the city-state isolated and vulnerable. Internally, the consequences were equally devastating. Spartan citizens struggled to reconcile their centuries-old belief in military invincibility with the harsh reality of defeat. Families mourned fallen warriors, while leaders faced scrutiny for decisions made before and during the battle. Political rivalries that had long simmered beneath the surface erupted into public debate and factionalism. The ephors and kings, once united in purpose, now found themselves in tense negotiation, each seeking to preserve personal influence as the city's collective power waned. Even the Helots, oppressed for generations, observed Sparta's weakened state with cautious hope, understanding that the balance of fear that had kept them in check was now fragile. The psychological toll on Spartan morale was profound. Soldiers who survived the battlefield carried not only physical wounds but a haunting sense of vulnerability. Their invincible reputation, carefully cultivated over generations of discipline and military success, had been shattered. The city's neighbors, once respectful or even fearful, now acted with audacity, emboldened by Sparta's first major defeat in decades. Each act of defiance, each whisper of dissent, further eroded the aura of Spartan dominance. Yet, the fallout was not only external. The defeat sparked internal debates about military reform, political accountability, and strategy. Generals questioned traditional tactics, while ephors debated new approaches to maintain control over both the citizen soldiers and the Helot population. Decisions taken in haste, born from fear and uncertainty, sometimes deepened divisions rather than strengthening unity. Sparta, which had once been the embodiment of order, now teetered on the edge of political chaos. By the end of this period, it became evident that the loss at Leuctra was not merely a military setback, it was a cataclysmic turning point. Sparta's golden age, built on centuries of discipline, loyalty, and unquestioned authority, was unraveling. The audience sees the magnitude of this collapse, allies plotting in secret, citizens questioning long-held beliefs, and leaders struggling to maintain cohesion. Emotional stakes remain high, as pride, fear, and uncertainty converge to reshape the destiny of one of history's most legendary powers. The stage is now set for reflection and legacy, the lessons of ambition, betrayal, and human fragility that resonate far beyond the battlefield. In the aftermath of defeat and political collapse, Sparta's golden age became a cautionary tale for all of Greece and, ultimately, for history itself. The city-state that had once embodied discipline, courage, and martial supremacy was now a shadow of its former self, a reminder that no power, however seemingly invincible, can survive hubris, internal division, and betrayal. The legacy of Leuctra and the subsequent turmoil reveals how ambition and envy, both within and outside a society, can unravel even the most meticulously structured civilization. Sparta's fall was not sudden, It was the culmination of decades of tension, rivalry, and fragile alliances. The very traits that had created a disciplined, formidable society, rigid hierarchy, unwavering pride, and an elite warrior culture, also carried seeds of vulnerability. Leaders blinded by tradition and overconfidence underestimated the ingenuity of rivals and the consequences of fractured loyalties. For the audience, the lesson is clear: strength without adaptability and unity without trust are perilous foundations for any empire. The emotional weight of Sparta's story endures in the human dimension of history. Soldiers, leaders, and citizens alike face the profound realization that loyalty is never absolute and that even the mightiest can be toppled by cunning, strategy, and betrayal. The audience is left reflecting on the personal stakes behind historical events, the fear, the grief, and the courage required to face both external enemies and internal fractures. This is a story not only of battles but of human nature itself, revealing timeless truths about ambition, trust, and resilience. Finally, Sparta's story resonates because it is both tragic and instructive. Its rise and fall serve as a mirror for civilizations throughout history, illustrating how glory can be fleeting and how the choices of individuals, whether for power, revenge, or survival, can alter the destiny of nations. As the camera pans across the rugged landscapes of Laconia, once the heart of an empire, viewers are left with a haunting reminder: history favors neither strength alone nor tradition alone, but the delicate balance of leadership, loyalty, and foresight. In closing, the betrayal that ended Sparta's Golden Age is more than an event, it is a timeless lesson. It teaches that greatness is fragile, that alliances are precious, and that even the most disciplined and powerful societies can fall when ambition and betrayal converge. For viewers, it is a final emotional and intellectual hook, leaving the story lingering in the mind long after the screen fades to black.